Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we're going to continue the discussion on Indonesia.
Okay.
Obviously, as we looked to bolster our relationships with countries in Asia and counter the PRC's influence, Indonesia has become a challenge. Just over the last decade, China has deepened its ties with Indonesia, in many cases in direct competition to the United States. China has delivered sizable investments, pouring billions of dollars into developing the world's largest nickel deposits, has been a major partner in the country's infrastructure push, including a high-speed train that is admittedly over budget and late. But China has invested in the first 9 months of 2022 $5 billion in Indonesia compared to the United States' $2 billion. And in return, Indonesia has been delivering back for the People's Republic of China. It voted in favor of the PRC's position at the UN on the persecution of the Uyghurs. And ASEAN, Indonesia has consistently been on the PRC side as far as unrestricted economic access to the 10 member nations. On the defense front, while the U.S. and Indonesia have held recent joint military exercises, the PRC and Indonesia have also announced that they will hold and resume exercises on their own. I believe Indonesia has expressed unhappiness with the recent Australia, UK, U.S. submarine agreement, with some officials threatening to not allow Australia's nuclear-powered submarines to travel through their sea lanes. Given its strategic location and miles of vital sea lane, Indonesia is a defensive necessity if the PRC decides to take Taiwan by force. Secretary Crittenbrink, what actions is the Biden administration considering to strengthen our ties with Indonesia, considering how important their geostrategic position in the world is?
Senator Ricketts, thank you very much. Couldn't agree with you more about the importance of Indonesia, and certainly Indonesia remains one of our most important partners in the region, as reflected in the strategic partnership the formal strategic partnership that we have with them. I would say, as the world's largest Muslim majority nation, the world's third largest democracy, and obviously as a long-standing leader in ASEAN, they have been one of our primary partners in the region for some time. We were gratified with the leadership that Indonesia showed last year in the G20, where I think they navigated a very difficult circumstance involving, obviously, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and also pressure from the PRC. And I think the outcomes of the G20 were quite productive, and we have similar expectations for how they will approach their chair year in ASEAN. I would say, Senator, that we have made significant investments in our relationship. I know last November, when President Biden traveled to Bali for the G20 summit, we announced a new Millennium Challenge Corporation program, compact rather, of $698 million. We announced $20 billion in public and private support for the new Just Energy Transition Partnership with Indonesia. And I think, Senator, I would say that friends in Indonesia often underscore that they live in a tough neighborhood. Like many partners in the region, they have often underscored that they don't want to be forced to choose. And our message to our friends in Indonesia and to all of our friends across ASEAN is, we're not asking you to choose. That's not the game that we play. Others may. We do not. We want to give countries like Indonesia choices, give them a better offer, and make sure they have the opportunity to make their own decisions free from coercion. I'm confident in the future of our partnership with Indonesia. I know that Indonesia, like others in the region, they don't want to be dominated or coerced by anyone. I'm confident that like we do, they value the partnership that we have together, and we're engaged in a whole range of areas, from the economic and the infrastructure side to people-to-people ties to security ties, including in the maritime domain, and I'm confident we'll continue to do that going forward. And again, I think as long as we continue to demonstrate our leadership and commitment to the region and to Indonesia, I'm optimistic about our future together.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you very much, Secretary. Appreciate your being here today, as well as Mr. Schiffer as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when you were going through the credentials of Secretary Crittenbrink, you forgot to mention that he is from Nebraska. So now he's a loper, so I didn't say Cornhuskers.
Thank you, Senator.
And I had the privilege of doing a trade mission in Vietnam when he was ambassador. So speaking of Nebraska, we certainly had the firsthand experience with the malign ambition and threats the Chinese Communist Party faces to Nebraskans when their spy balloon floated across our airspace as well as a number of other states' airspace. And of course, Nebraska is home to the Strategic Command, which manages our nuclear forces. So very concerning with regard to that. But it's nothing, it pales in comparison to what the Chinese Communist Party does to Taiwan, whether it's cyber attacks, fighter jets, warplanes, and that sort of thing. And of course, President Xi in his most recent party congress, again, reiterated his desire to unify with Taiwan by force, if necessary. And that, obviously, this has been the topic of conversation here already. And obviously, it's important for us to be able to provide to the government of Taiwan the arms they need to protect themselves. I think we've got former Indo-PACOM Commander Admiral Davidson, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Gilday, Air Mobility Commander General Mike Minahan, all have said that China could be attempting to take over Taiwan sometime in the next few years. And President Biden has been strong in talking about defending Taiwan, sometimes so much the staff has had to walk back some of his comments. My question gets to the budget proposal where, help me with this, I'm looking through this and I don't see, as I'm walking through this budget, very many mentions of Taiwan. In fact, just one in the entire budget where Taiwan is even mentioned as a priority. You get the new global FMF line, which provides only $16 million baseline for Indo-Pacific. And that's not just for Taiwan, that's the entire Indo-Pacific. So talk to me about what this budget means for helping to make sure Taiwan can defend itself should the Chinese Communist Party want to take over Taiwan by force. $16 million doesn't sound like very much money. And again, I think the USAID, you were talking about, you were proposing like a 25% increase in your budget. It was like $193 million, something like that. So there seems to be a disconnect there.
Senator, thank you very much for your questions. And again, let me just underscore what a priority is and how important it is to the United States of America that we continue to maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, and that we deter any possibility of precipitous PRC action aimed at Taiwan. I think, as you've outlined, we noted, of course, China's stated policies in which they claim that the so-called great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is incomplete without, quote-unquote, reunifying with Taiwan. So this is deeply concerning. We are deeply concerned by the range of Chinese coercive actions aimed at Taiwan that threaten to undermine the status quo and the peace and stability that is so important to all of us. I can underscore and I want to make absolutely clear, Senator, that not everything that we're doing on Taiwan is going to be reflected in the budget lines before you. Just under this administration, just last year, actually, we notified 13 different arms sales to Taiwan. We've notified $15 billion, or rather $5 billion, excuse me, $5 billion in foreign military sales to Taiwan under the Biden administration. And that accounts for, in the larger picture, $37 billion since 2010 and $21 billion since 2019. So we are committed to making available to Taiwan the necessary defensive arms so that it can maintain a sufficient defense capacity. I will point out, Senator, we are open to and we are grateful for the various options that have been made available to the administration to assist Taiwan to maintain self-defense capacity. We are open to exploring all of those different avenues. I think that foreign military sales have been the primary channel that has been used to date, but we are open to exploring all of those means. And again, we are absolutely committed to meeting our obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act.
In your opinion, do we need, given the potential threat here from the Chinese Communist Party to take Taiwan by force, is it your opinion that we need to accelerate arms sales to Taiwan? And are there specific things that you would recommend that the government of Taiwan focus on with regard to the types of military sales?
Well, Senator, we're doing everything possible to accelerate all of the arms sales that have already been notified. And some of that is related to improvements that the U.S. government can make, needs to make. Some of that is related to supply chain and industrial-based challenges, and I know that we work with members of the Senate to address those as well. But again, we will meet our obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act to assist Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense. At the same time, arms sales alone don't represent everything that we're doing, of course. We're consulting with our Taiwan partners on a daily basis on the things that they can do to better defend themselves. And that relates to the various defense reforms that President Tsai and others have carried out in Taiwan. That includes mobilizing an quote-unquote all-society defense. It means investing in asymmetric defense capabilities that we believe better deter the possibility of a precipitous action against Taiwan. And it also involves things like extending the mandatory service or conscription period for Taiwan youth to 1 year. So and it also has involved quite a substantial increase in Taiwan's own defense budget. So we think together with meeting our obligations, friends in Taiwan have done a great deal to increase their own defensive capacity. And then I would add, Senator, as I mentioned to the ranking member, we're also working with partners around the world who, like us, share an interest in maintaining peace and stability so that we can build out deterrence in that way as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Crittenbrink, at the end of your last question answer to me, you talked about how it's more than just arms sales that will help deter the People's Republic of China. And I couldn't agree more. We need to shore up existing alliances, develop new security partnerships. And one of the things that a lot of countries in Asia care about is trade. And that seems to be missing from this overall strategy. The President unveiled his Indo-Pacific Economic Framework in October of 2021 that set a high-level outline for things like labor standards and environment, open digital trade data flows, free, fair, and open trade and investment policies, resilient supply chains, you just mentioned that. But it doesn't really do that. It's not envisioned in the concept of a traditional trade agreement talking about tariffs or market access. And to me, it doesn't seem like that actually will help fundamentally shift supply chains, doesn't help promote U.S. agriculture or manufacturing. Specifically, if you think about Nebraska, where we have a lot of trade exports in agriculture. Doesn't help encourage countries to really embrace these standards. In fact, it's not even really an agreement at all, but just talks about an outline about how talks might begin down the road. In the meantime, the People's Republic of China is not wasting any time. They've entered into a regional comprehensive economic partnership, free trade pact that includes many of our allies and covers about 30% of the world's population. And the chairman mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative, where the People's Republic of China is making significant investments in Pacific nations. I think they're the largest investor in Pacific nations, and it's building goodwill for them. So my question is, how does the Biden administration expect to effectively compete with the People's Republic of China's influence in the region if we don't have a more ambitious and comprehensive trade strategy for how we're going to develop these trade relationships with countries in that part of the world?
Senator, thank you very much for your question. We are quite excited by the prospects involved in IPEF, where, as you noted, it's true that tariff liberalization will not be part of IPEF, but nevertheless, among the four pillars in IPEF is a trade pillar that we think is incredibly important to breaking down a range of non-tariff barriers and creating a common set of high standard rules across the region. So we believe in IPEF, we have the region's 14, including the United States, of the most important dynamic economies in the region. And we are aiming to set the rules of the road for the 21st century economy. So as I mentioned, in the trade pillar does not include tariff liberalization, but it includes many other elements that we think are important, including issues related to labor, environment, the digital economy, and the like. The other pillars of IPEF are related to supply chains, clean energy, and then what we call the fair economy, tax, and anti-corruption. So we believe that IPEF will be a transformational agreement. It includes many elements that are unprecedented. We are committed to concluding it at an early date, and I think you can see through its membership, it shows as well, I think, the appetite for U.S. engagement, including U.S. economic engagement across the region.
So you don't believe that tariffs need to be a part of that overall equation as well? I mean, this is the hard dollars, right, that countries care about. And you just acknowledge that the tariffs are not part of this.
They're not part of the current conversations, Senator, but we are confident that IPEF, when concluded, will be an important and transformational agreement that is very much in America's national interest and in the interest of America's farmers and workers.
Okay. I do want to follow up real quick on one of the things that the chairman was talking about with regard to the sanctions on North Korea. I believe that in the 3 months since the White House announced announced that Pyongyang was covertly supplying rockets and missiles to U.S. sanctioned Wagner Group, that only one Slovakian individual has been sanctioned for attempting to negotiate the North Korean-Russia arms deal. And I'm wondering, what is the status of implementing these sanctions on North Korea that were overwhelmingly passed on a bipartisan basis? Besides the Slovakian national sanction in late March of 2023, why has the administration not sanctioned North Korean and Russian entities, individuals, and banks involved in this Pyongyang-Moscow proliferation activities?
Well, Senator, we remain deeply concerned by a range of North Korean actions, including the action you've referred to of it providing weapons to the Wagner Group for Russia's use in Ukraine. As you noted, we have applied sanctions related to that action, and we're committed to taking whatever actions we can to penalize those involved in that action and to deter further transactions. But this is a deeply concerning and disturbing action, no doubt about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.